I'm Emily, and I'm going to talk to you about TIPS. So Jill introduced it a little bit. TIPS is our data submission pipeline into TreeGenes, and it connects to Cartograplant. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of our internal pipeline and the work that the curation team has done, and then I'm going to go through and just sort of do a step-by-step process to show you what it's like to use our data submission pipeline. So Jill mentioned that and it's in the name, that it's a triple module, which means that any triple site can also, if they wish, to integrate it into their site as well. And the reason we developed TIPS is because we wanted an easier, standardized way to support users to give us data. And as part of that, we support the FAIR principles, especially for Cartograplant reusability of data. And what we're bringing in with TIPS is mostly association and population studies. So we collect a lot of details about metadata and how things are collected, as well as the actual genotype, phenotype, and environmental data. So TIPSc is a modified version of TIPS that our curation team uses, and it has a few modifications because as an external curation team, we don't always have access to the same details that the original authors do. And as Jill said, this is how data gets into Cartograplant, particularly genetic data. So I wanted to sort of show you most of the data that's come into Cartograplant that you see, the genetic data in the app, is from our curation team. Some of it has come in through direct user submissions, but the vast majority is from our curation team. And right now in Cartograplant, so this is everything that's been completed. We have over 50 studies from over 50 species, which is over 50,000 plants. And I'm so used to saying trees here. I apologize if I say trees instead of plants. And that is over 1 million phenotypes and millions of genotypes. And there's lots more in process. And as Jill mentioned, there's a lot more than just setting up for the TIPSc curation team. There's a lot more than just setting up a submission. There's a lot of work that has to go into selecting the right studies, formatting and standardizing the data that is available for the studies, correcting any problems, contacting the authors if more details are needed. So this is just a few examples of things that are available on Dryad. And you can see just visually that the standardization of how data is presented is very, very different. So it is actually a huge amount of work to make sure that everything is in the correct format and properly annotated. So now I'm going to walk through what it's like to actually do a TIP submission. And to do this, you have to have a user account and be signed in. The user accounts are very easy to sign up for, and we don't spam you or anything. So from our tools menu, you can go to data submission, and then you select the PopGen submission. We also have a way to submit genetic maps to us, so there's 2 options. Because this is connected to a user account, you can start a submission and save it and come back anytime to finish it. So when you go to the screen, it asks if you want to do a new submission or if you want to pick up an in-process submission. And then for this demonstration, I picked an article, and I actually think that we have one of the authors with us today. So I wanted to say, this is a great paper. Not only is it a nice paper, but all of the data that was provided was standardized, and there was all the metadata that we needed available. So that was really awesome. Thank you. And we're just going to walk through what it's like to do a TIP submission. So you can see at the top, it shows you where you are, what stage you're at. And it asks for information as you go through. The first page is pretty standard information about your paper, the authors, the journal, and then you can see we take in what species you're looking at. If it's a species that is not currently in the database, all you have to do is enter the species name and we take care of the rest. And then the next stage, you move on to actually giving us more information. So this is where we do a lot of the metadata collection, and what we ask for is highly dependent on how your study was designed. So in this case, we have genotype and environmental data to submit in its natural population study. You can select a common garden or a greenhouse study or a number of different options. And then of course, there's different data types that can be submitted as well. And we ask some information which varies depending on your study design. Once you have completed that, we collect the plant accessions. So this is the georeferenced information. It is not 100% necessary if you want to submit data to us and you do not have coordinates. You can still submit data to us, but we can't display it in Cartograplant because of the coordinates issue. But we have this really nice feature where you can upload your file and then a little clip of your file gets presented to you, and we ask you to confirm what information is in each column. And this way, we are all on the same page and we know exactly what data is what, and we can put it in the correct place in the database. And for the georeference information, we have a nice little button down here. Once you've uploaded your file, it shows you on a map where things are. And so this is a nice like instant visual to show you, did your data get read correctly? Do they appear in the right spot? So the next stage is submitting your data. And I'm just gonna, for this one, I'm gonna pop to a different data submission, study submission that had phenotype data to submit, to talk a little bit more about how phenotypes come into us. So Jill mentioned that we leverage ontologies in this version of our data submission pipeline. And this has been really incredible for Cartograplant because the amount of variability in how phenotypes are defined on the user end, defined and named on the user end, is huge. A very common phenotype for tree studies is diameter breast height. Pretty straightforward, extremely common, and yet when we get data submitted to us, it has come in dozens of different names for the same phenotype. It might be abbreviated, the age of the tree might be added to the end, the year, etc. So when we leverage these ontology terms, we can be sure that we are identifying all of the data points that are a particular phenotype, and we're able to connect them on the Cartograplant side, and they're therefore available for analysis. The way this happens, you click this little add phenotype button, and we ask you to tell us the attribute, so what the actual phenotype is, what was being assessed, and the structure. And that way, on the Cartograplant side, people can search by structure or phenotype. And I have the MIAPI symbol here because we conform to the MIAPI standards, which is minimum information about plant phenotyping experiments. And this is a set of standards to ensure that data for plant phenotyping experiments is reusable across the community. And we're actually continuing to develop in this area. We are working on a list of very common phenotypes like diameter, breast height, that users can select from a drop-down box, so they don't have to enter the attribute and the structure separately. We're going to jump back to our first submission, and then genotype information side. It asks information about your markers. And for SNPs, for example, how the experiment was designed, and some more details. And there's a section for uploading a reference genome or transcriptome, or if we have the reference genome already loaded, you can just select that or provide a URL. So there's a lot of flexibility, but we're also trying to ensure that we collect as much information as possible to make this data really reusable and useful for other people. There's a section to upload your file, which can be an ASCII or a VCF. And then the bottom, well, actually you can see a little check mark. The next stage is the environmental layers, if that's applicable. And since we already have these loaded, this is WorldClim data. If you use WorldClim data or another data layer that we have loaded, you can simply select what parameters you used, and we load and associate that with your study. And that's it. From here, you click submit. It goes to us. We approve it. Going forward. Uh-oh. I appear to be frozen. Sorry about that. Let's try that again. Okay. Here is a summary of a submission, and from your user profile, you can go in and look at submissions that are in process or completed. And Jill actually showed some of these already, some of these next screenshots. This is what, on the public side, the tips, the study submission overview looks like. You have a little map to show where these trees are coming from. At the bottom, you have an information panel displaying the study details and the data that's available. So here's the genotype tab. You can click through, users can click through to download the data directly, or there's a link that goes out to Cartography that shows you the study that's selected, and you can zoom in and see tree details. Thank you so much, and I especially want to do a big shout out to our curation team for the incredible amount of work that they have done, and all of the developers at TIPS, because it's a lot. And our goal here is really to make things easy for you, the users, to submit to us. So if you have any feedback or problems, don't hesitate to email us and let us know.